Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the channel, and for those of you that have been living under a rock, you may not have known that a new Pokemon game has released on mobile called Pokemon Pocket. Essentially, a very simplified version of the trading card game. Now, right now, it's in its early phases. So there are only a few decks, a few types of packs that you can open, but of course, this is going to expand over time. Now, this video is going to be about advanced tips and tricks, things that you're probably not going to learn from the tutorial, and things that maybe aren't so obvious. If you're looking for a super beginner-friendly guide, and we are going to cover things that are relevant for beginners here, but if you're looking for a really beginner-friendly guide that has loads of great tips and tricks, go check out my boy Spraggles. You can see it on the screen here. He did one of the most in-depth guides that I've seen for Pokemon Pocket. Covers loads of the basics, but we're not going to cover as much of the stuff that he's covered there because a lot of it is, you know, generally stuff if you've been playing a few days, you probably have picked up some of those tips already, but it is still a great video, so I do recommend that you go and check it out. He had one tip right at the end, though, which I really loved, and hopefully he won't be too grumpy at me for saying his tip out loud, but basically, don't ruin the game for yourself. This is one of those things that I've learned as I've got older. Sometimes it feels like you need to min-max to be good. You need to be competitive. You need to do everything to be the best you can possibly be. Right now, there is absolutely no downside for losing in Pokemon Pocket. They make it super easy to concede. You lose absolutely nothing by losing. This is the time where you should go out and experiment. Go and make decks that you want to try out. Go and find some couple of cool Pokemon and see if you can make your own top tier deck. You're never going to get the opportunity to do that again. And the longer this game's out, with the more content creators and the more websites that exist, there are going to be more and more guides telling you how to play the game. When it comes to card games, almost 50% of the fun comes from building your own decks, which is why people love arena modes or like sort of draft modes in card games, because they get that deck building experience from a way that makes it feel like they're doing something from scratch. So, if you're going to take any advice, you know, when it comes to playing the game, do not hyperfixate on having the best possible decks. Go and play the stuff that you like, pick a Pokemon that you think looks cool, play around it, build a deck around it, see what you can discover. That is really important. But let's jump into the actual tips from this video, and we'll see how we can help. The first tip, and this is probably something that most of you have asked or Googled or just tried to find an answer to when you started this game. What booster packs should I focus on? You obviously have three options. You've got the Mewtwo booster packs, the Pikachu booster packs, and the Charizard booster packs. Well, the genuine answer that I'll give you is actually, if you're interested in playing this game in the long run, there is no real need to focus on a particular type of booster pack. Open whichever one you kind of like and just build your collection up. That's the lazy answer. The less lazy answer is it depends on kind of if you've got a deck in mind that you want to go for. I would always recommend for new players that they focus on the Mewtwo X deck, and the reason, or the Mewtwo Genetic Apex booster pack. The reason I would suggest that is because you can build this very competitive, very top tier Mewtwo deck. I've done a video on it, linking above. This very competitive, very top tier Mewtwo deck. You can build it primarily pulling from the Mewtwo booster pack. Mewtwo comes from there, and the Gardevoir line comes from there, as well as Giovanni, which is useful across many decks. The only thing that doesn't come from the Mewtwo booster deck is Sabrina. Now, Sabrina is useful and very powerful, but not necessary. I can compare that to other archetype decks. So this is a great website, by the way, Pokemon Zone. If you go to Pikachu, to get things for Pikachu deck, you would need to pull from 3 different booster packs, even though the Pikachu line is still very strong. Then you look at the Starmie X deck, and again, pulls from 3 different Genetic Apex decks. Have a look at Venusaur, 2, but there is obviously pulling from, you need to pull Charizard to get the Erica, and that means you're not getting Pokemon, you're only trying to pull for the trainers of Sabrina and Erica is kind of really essential to this deck because it keeps your grass-type Pokemon alive a lot longer. So the reason I like to suggest Mewtwo X is because you can practically pull everything that you need from the Mewtwo booster pack, and then you'll suddenly have a very competitive deck. So with that in mind, I would always say that if you're really just wanting to get like a viable deck together, focus on Mewtwo is a good place to start because you can build a deck relatively quickly. Also means that when you build up pack points, you can go and use your pack point exchange to go and pick up things like the odd Gardevoir that you're missing. Park Point Exchange is also a pretty good way to build up any missing parts of your collection as well. It's very expensive to get X Pokemon from Park Point Exchange, so I'd never usually recommend going for it because you'll eventually pick up the X Pokemon just by opening packs. But it's a good way to pick up like individual missing trainers or Pokemon that you might need, and that's, you know, a pretty good place to start. But I would say, for the most part, if you're looking to focus on building a competitive deck, opening a Mewtwo packs is the most efficient way of getting there more quickly than if you were opening up Charizard or Pikachu packs. But obviously, kind of build around the Pokemon that you get. But if you're from a blank slate, it's always good to start with Mewtwo. So the second tip comes in the form of Wonder Picks. Now, Wonder Picks are pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, when you have the resource available, you can pick from one of the packs that your friends and non-friends opened, but there's a couple of important things to know. Obviously, the Wonder Pick cost scales with how rare the highest tier Pokemon in that pack was. You'll also be able to see on the bottom left-hand screen of the cards, you'll have this little symbol. That little symbol means that it's in your collection already. So you can see there's everything that I've kind of already got in my collection already. However, something that I didn't figure out until about 3 weeks into playing is that you can actually, even though it says expired, you can go back and pick up expired Wonder Picks if there's something in there that you really want. And actually, it's using a resource called hourglasses, which I had like these these stopwatches or rewind stopwatches. I don't know what the hell they're called. They're the little things that you get when you level up. I had no idea what they did until very recently. But as you can see, you've got them, and you can actually go ahead and use a rewinded Wonder Pick. Now, wish me luck. I really want the Magnemite because I don't have that many Magnemites. Oh, I got the Zebra Strike. I've got about 50 billion of these. I suppose it was the best Pokemon in the pack, but I have got about 50 billion of those. But had no idea that you could use the expired Wonder Picks if you wanted to. So make sure that you use those resources as well. There's nothing else that you can use them for. Also, make sure you send thanks to everybody. You actually get rewarded, I think, as part of a mission for sending thanks. So there's never a good reason not to say thanks. I think you can see it here. Wonder Pick 7 times actually. But yeah, there's never a good reason not to say thanks because you know, it's free, and I think you actually get some mission rewards for it as well. Now, some notes about the shop. Obviously, you get a daily shop gift every single day. You have the hourglasses, which you can see here. I have exchanged all of these single hourglasses. You can also exchange these hourglasses here. I'm going to do it because there's literally no point not to. They are cheaper than the monthly option, but once you have exchanged them, they are gone. So they are now exchanged. However, you could also do it at a slightly more expensive rate, but they do refresh monthly. So just worth noting that you should always use your non-monthly versions first and then move on to your monthly versions when you have enough shop tickets. There is this special shop ticket that is worth 300 tokens, and obviously you get a token every time you receive thanks from somebody. But I'll talk about those tokens in a little bit more detail. You can obviously pick up the accessories. Definitely recommend that you do so. The accessories are really cool. Then there are the cards. Pick up 2 of every single card in the shop, but you don't need any more than 2 because you can never put more than 2 of a card in your deck. Pick up 2 of every single card in the shop. You need them for most of your decks. Professor's Research is non-negotiable in most decks. Pokeball is non-negotiable in most decks. X Speed is non-negotiable in most decks. And Potion is often non-negotiable in most decks. Red Card is useful, and people aren't really using Hand Scope or Pokedex right now, but I'm sure at some point they will come into use. So definitely pick up 2 of each from the shop. It is really important that you do so, and it's the only place that you can currently get them. So if you're wondering where those cards come from, it is literally just a shop, and they're really cheap. You pick up 2 of each very easily. So the special shop tokens are available in the shop for 300 shop tokens. Now, that's expensive, and you could exchange it that way if you really wanted to. They get access to special series cosmetics, which look really cool, especially the card sleeve. I think they look amazing. However, there is an easier and a far more accessible way to get these, which I'm going to show you right now. The other way to obtain special shop tokens is if you have multiple versions of a 1-star alternative art card. So I've already done this a couple of times. I'm going to use the Snorlax as an example because I have 3 Snorlaxes. If you go to obtain Flair, you can actually exchange it for a special shop token. Alternatively, you can obviously exchange it for a type of Flare straight up. There is no scaling Flare type with these. So ultimately, I would definitely suggest picking the Flare that you like first if you ever want to use it, or you can just straight up exchange it for a shop token like this. And that gets you a special shop token. Obviously, what I would say is that for the most part, I would recommend going for the Flair that you like and then potentially picking up a special shop token. But they are very exclusive cosmetics that are going to be very difficult to grind for. So that is why, you know, going down this route, if there are cards that you just don't think you're going to play that often, or you just got lots of copies of them, this is the way that you can end up doing it. And I've done that on a couple of mine already to pick up some of these special shop tokens, because getting 300 normal shop tokens is pretty difficult. Speaking of Flairs, if you don't know what they are, essentially, as you can see, you get it for when you've got more than 2 cards. You can only ever include 2 copies of a card in your deck. So having anything more than 2 is kind of irrelevant. So when you get 3 copies, you can go to your deck screen and you can basically pick up a Flair for a particular Pokemon. These Flairs scale for most of them. For the X versions, every time you get an extra one, you can start scaling them. And yeah, they just become more and more sort of specific to the Pokemon, more and more cool. Everybody starts off with like a basic like Dazzle Flair, but the more and more that you pick up and the more and more cards that you get, the more specific it becomes. I'm going to show you another one here, Gengar Rex. It uses the Shine Dust, which actually is in quite high abundance if you haven't done this, but once you start using the Shine Dust to pick up the Flairs, you will actually start running out of Shine Dust relatively quickly. I'll show you this one for Gengar as well. So I've got that sort of the Sparkle Flare, but as you can see, it kind of goes more and more specific all the way up to like that one there, which is very kind of Gengar focused. So they've got some really cool cosmetics, and it comes down when you actually play the card in combat. So very, very cool. That's how you get special shop tokens. There's a little note on Flairs as well. So, a couple of things that I want to talk about before we get into a battle and talk to you about specific tips within a battle. I want to talk a bit about the breakdown of a turn. I also want to talk about something called the Pokemon Checkup, which not a lot of people will know in detail. So, the turn is broken down into 2 major phases, the doing stuff part and the attacking part. You can attack once per turn, and once you attack, your turn is over. So, you want to do stuff before you attack. So you can do everything else you can do in whatever order you want. That includes, once you've drawn your cards at least, that includes putting Pokemon on the bench, attaching energy to your Pokemon, playing the trainer cards that you have in your hand. Of course, you can play, the difference between item cards and a specific trainer card is that item cards you can play as many as you want, but once you play an actual trainer card like Professor's Research or Sabrina, you can only play 1 of those per turn. So that's like a supporting trainer card. The item trainer cards, they can be used as much as you want. You can evolve your Pokemon, and as it says here, neither player can evolve Pokemon on the first turn, whether they go first or second. You can obviously also use Pokemon abilities, like the Gardevoir ability, and you can also retreat your Pokemon. You can only retreat 1 Pokemon per turn, and you can either use X speed to reduce the retreat cost, or you need to sacrifice energy based on the amount of energy it takes to retreat that Pokemon on their card. I'm going to talk about some of the extra conditions with that when we get to the Pokemon Checkup. But then once you've done this, you can use your Pokemon as attack. Once you attack, that's it. The Pokemon, that's your turn over. So once you make your attack, you have to be sure that you didn't want to do anything else your turn. So make sure you do all of your setup, all of your trainer cards, all of the extras before you hit attack. You will not be able to do anything else once you've hit attack. I've done that several times where I've for some reason attacked, thought I could do something afterwards, and the turn is straight up ending. The next thing is the Pokemon Checkup. The Pokemon Checkup is a step that happens at after the end of each turn. So during a Pokemon Checkup, the state of both players' Pokemon is checked. If there are any abilities or trainer cards that come into effect during the Pokemon Checkup, those are applied. Any Pokemon that has no HP remaining at the end of a Pokemon Checkup is knocked out. If both players' Pokemons are affected by special conditions, the player whose turns just ended checks their special conditions first. So let's say both sides of the Pokemon are poisoned, and you attack and you end your turn. Your poison will check up first, and all of the rest of the special conditions will check up first. If one Pokemon is affected by multiple special conditions are checked in the following order: poisoning, then burning, sleep, and then paralyze. The Pokemon Checkup is not considered to be any part of any player's turn. So once a turn ends, the Pokemon Checkup occurs. It checks first on the player's side that just ended, and then it checks second on the player's side that is about to go, and then it will reverse once the next turn comes through. And really interesting, a lot of you may not know exactly what some of the special conditions do, and this is a great place to dive into them. Poison Pokemon will take 10 damage during each Pokemon Checkup, and this poison condition can stack with other special conditions. Burned Pokemon take 20 damage during each Pokemon Checkup, and the player whose Pokemon is burned flips a coin during each Pokemon checkup, and if heads, the Pokemon recovers from being burned, and if tails, the Pokemon stays being burned. And that can stack with other special conditions. Poisoning, interestingly enough, cannot be removed unless you evolve the Pokemon or you move the Pokemon to the bench. And that's what I'm going to talk about in just a moment. Burning, however, if your Pokemon is burnt, you flip a coin, and if it's heads, it will then unburn itself. If it's tails, it will remain burned. That happens with the player that just ended their turn, followed by the player whose turn is about to go. So let's say that you burn the enemy active Pokemon. As soon as your turn ends, it will then do a burn check on the enemy's side before their turn starts, and then it will do a burn check on the enemy's side after their turn ends if they don't happen to basically clear themselves of burning pretty much straight away. So what happens like with when you're poisoned is that automatically applies at the end of each turn. So once you end your turn, 10 poison damage. Once they end their turn, 10 poison damage, unless they have somehow removed that particular poisoning. When you burn an enemy Pokemon, they take 20 damage and then they flip a coin. So if you burn the enemy Pokemon, they are guaranteed to take at least 20 damage. If they then fail their heads, they will take another 20 damage at the end of their turn until they get the heads coin flip. The coin flip occurs after the Pokemon has been burned. That's to prevent you burning the enemy Pokemon, and then they flipping a coin and get heads and they just take no damage. Fun fact, there aren't actually any Pokemon in the game right now that can burn, so I'm going to assume that's for something later on. Asleep Pokemon cannot attack or retreat. The player whose Pokemon is asleep flips a coin during each Pokemon checkup. If heads, the Pokemon recovers. If tails, it stays asleep. That means Pokemon like Hypno and Vileplume that put the enemy to sleep, they can immediately wake up before their turn begins. It does not guarantee a sleep on the next turn. If they get a heads on the end of your turn, they will wake up for their turn. Paralyzed Pokemon cannot attack or retreat after its owner's next turn. It recovers during Pokemon Checkup. So, paralyzed Pokemon, you paralyze a Pokemon. Usually there's a coin flip that happens on the paralysis attack. If it paralyzes, that Pokemon cannot attack or retreat, and it will automatically recover on the Pokemon Checkup at the end of next turn. So there's no coin flip involved in terms of recovery. It's a guaranteed stun for one turn, but you usually have to do the coin flip on your attack side. Whereas with sleep, it is a guaranteed sleep, but they do an immediate coin flip when it gets to their turn, meaning it's not a guaranteed stun lock. When a confused Pokemon attack, the owner must flip a coin. If heads, the attack works normally, but if tails, the attack doesn't happen and the player's turn ends. So confused Pokemon, they remain confused. They can't clear it unless they evolve or are moved to the bench, and they will have to flip a coin to see if the attack even goes through. Confused is actually quite a powerful condition. Asleep, paralyzed, and confused cannot stack with each other. If one of these special conditions is applied, it replaces any of the other conditions. So poison and burn can stack with everything and with each other. Paralyzed, confused, and asleep will override each other depending on the last one that was applied. The Pokemon can recover from special conditions if one of the following conditions are met. The Pokemon is moved to the bench. Only active Pokemon can have special conditions applied to them. If an active Pokemon returns to the bench by retreating or some other way, let's say that you use Sabrina or you use Pidgeot's special ability, it will remove that special condition. The Pokemon evolves. If it evolves, it will recover from all of its special effect conditions, including poison and burning and all the rest of them. If a card effect is used, some Pokemon attacks and abilities and some trainer cards have effects that allow Pokemon to recover from special conditions. Okay, so there are some cards that allow you to recover from special conditions as well. So that is a little bit of a breakdown of special conditions, something that probably many of you won't actually have the details on, and is actually a really important part of learning the game. So we're going to do some general battle tips now. I'm going to kind of play through a couple of games and show you what I mean. First things first, as a beginner, check remaining actions. It's quite a nice addition to have. It'll just remind you if you've actually forgotten to do anything in the game. It'll also display next energy generated. Usually if you're playing a singular energy deck, it won't matter, but it is always good to kind of have the knowledge when you're playing a multi-energy deck, which one's coming up, even if they are random and you have no control of it. It helps you plan a little bit better, so there's absolutely no way that I would have those turned off. I do have check and action turned off for the time being, but that's only because right now I don't really need it. Now I can't evolve on my first turn, but what I can do is, so here's a little tip. Professor's Research is a random draw 2 cards. Pokeball will draw a basic Pokemon. In this situation, I have a Ralts already. I don't really want another Ralts here. So what I can do is I can use Professor's Research first, which will draw 2 random cards. If I draw a Ralts, which I didn't, then I'll actually increase the chances or guarantee that I get a Mewtwo. Now it's a 2 in 3 chance that I get a Mewtwo, but I get another Ralts. So it's going to be an interesting game. In this situation, I have an energy to spend. What I could do is put it on the Ralts and start hitting Snorm, but I'm not that bothered doing that. I'm going to put it on this Ralts here, just in case I need to build up and get my Gardevoir out with 3 energy. So in certain situations, you do not need to always put your energy on your active Pokemon. You can actually use it on your bench Pokemon, and your active Pokemon can simply sit there as a tank. This guy's got non-X Articuno and another non-X Articuno. Or is that an X Articuno? So he's probably going to start building those up on his bench. And no, he's actually going to start hitting me with his Snom. I'm not bothered, it's 10 damage a turn. Whereas I am now building up my Ralts, which I'm going to evolve into a Curlier. I'm just going to keep it safe for as long as physically possible. Now I have another Professor's Research here, so let's see if I can draw something good. Wow. Well, I've got Gardevoirs coming out my ass. But yeah, nothing major to do in this situation. So yeah, like I said, a very like simple battle tip is that you do not need to slap things on your active Pokemon. This guy is going for Powder Snow, so he's going to see if your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. He's also going to deal 40 damage to me. Sleep, I will have my Pokemon Checkup, and my Pokemon stays asleep, but I don't really care. That Ralts is designed to kind of die. So this is a great situation, by the way, for me to use red card in, which I'm just going to straight up do it. So also keep an eye on the retreat costs for Pokemon. So obviously for Articuno it is only 1, but the retreat costs are also really important because they will help you understand if it's the right thing to do to sort of swap a Pokemon in with a high retreat cost. Sacking one of your other Pokemon off to kind of get towards your win condition is perfectly fine. In that case, all my Ralts that my Curlier did was buy me about 1 billion turns for me to draw my Mewtwo. He will just Blizzard me, but I will be able to one-shot him next turn. Blizzard will take me down to 70. I Potion, I go back up to 90, and then there's nothing on his side that can actually one-shot me, and I should be able to kill any of his Pokemon for a free win. Oh, interesting. That's a really smart move. Right, I better hope that I wake up. I do wake up. Great. I will just instant bonk him, so he can't put me to sleep anymore. Has he got anything on that Articuno? No. So he can put in one of his Articuno X that can Blizzard next turn. But he won't kill me, and I'll kill his Articuno X. I was very lucky I got the... that was the best line of play that he had to try and sleep me. He'll put an energy on, he'll Blizzard, and then I'll one-shot him next turn. That's fine. I'll just put my Gardevoir in. He can't kill me, because he's already used 1 Giovanni. Did it, boys. So something that you saw me do there at the end, which was actually pretty important and actually quite good for understanding how to win games more effectively, is understanding the enemy's decks. They've got 20 cards. They can have maximum 2 copies of any 1 card in their deck. I knew at the end there was absolutely no way that any Giovanni shenanigans could come through. Maybe Sabrina, but he had already used 1 Sabrina, so I was relatively confident. There was 1 Giovanni used, so he couldn't double stack Giovanni there. So like tracking your opponent's cards is always really important. Actually really important as well is tracking X speeds, because sometimes going for a Sabrina play and swapping in a high retreat cost Pokemon is good once you know they don't have any X speeds, because they can immediately get that back out. So tracking your opponent's cards is a really good way to ensure that you are staying ahead in the tactics play in the game. Little interesting note, and I'm just playing with the rental deck to show you this. Some Pokemon have the ability to attack anybody on the field, including those that are benched. Zebra Strike is an example of that. Someone like Seadra is also an example of that. Thunder Spear, this Pokemon does 30 damage to 1 of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, interestingly enough, if this attacks the active slot, the weakness will trigger, and it will deal 50 damage to Froakie. However, if I deal 30 damage to Pidgey, who is weak to electric, it will only do 30 damage. Weakness only applies to Pokemon that are in the active slot, which is quite important to know. especially if you're trying to play around with a fun deck like this, where you are attempting to hit the back line and take out some of the weaker Pokemon and try and just sort of get around them having strong Pokemon in the front line. Another quick battle note, maximum 10 cards in hand. I only found that out actually very recently. If you use Professor's Research and you already have 9 cards in hand, you just won't draw another card. So always worth noting that you can only have 10 cards in hand. If you're looking for a good starter deck to get kind of into the groove, then things like Starmie X and Pikachu X are really good because they ramp up very quickly and they're relatively simple to play. They don't require a huge amount to kind of get right. Pikachu X, I love this. We got Zap. We don't actually have Pikachu X in hand right now, but we have got Zapdos and 2 Electrodes. Not actually the most fantastic start for this deck, but it is what it is. Zapdos X is an alternate win condition here. Let's have a look at what this guy's got. He is playing with Mewtwo X, and has he got a Ralts? No, he's got 2 Mewtwo X's. So, interestingly enough, he might actually display a tactic that I like to use in this situation, where we have got a Mewtwo X and a Mewtwo X. He's going to use one Mewtwo X to simply just sit there and take a beating, and he's going to use another Mewtwo X to stack up and try and get towards a side drive, which could potentially just one-shot one of my X Pokemon. That's kind of what Side Drive's designed to do. I've actually got 2 Voltorbs, looking to hopefully get a Pikachu X here. He's probably going to put that straight onto his... Okay, interestingly enough, not going for the tactic that I would have done in this situation. Maybe looking to get Side Drive up and going. I'm going to just draw... I should hopefully draw a Pikachu X here, no, just a normal Pikachu. I'm not actually going to place anything down here because one of my win conditions is actually just straight up Pikachu X. So I'm not actually going to place anything down. I'm actually going to just drop that on my Zapdos, and I'm going to peck him. Zapdos can do a very large amount of damage with Thundering Hurricane, so we'll see. We'll see what this guy does. If I were him, I would have actually just started stacking up Mewtwo. Hope that in the time that I was stacking up Mewtwo, I could get a Ralts, a Curlier, and then obviously a Gardevoir. Instead, he's actually going to go for the Mewtwo on the front lines here, which does mean the Mewtwo on the back lines is going to be a little bit weak if he then is going to immediately try, if he's going to try and immediately pull that into battle. He may also retreat his Mewtwo, but he should now guaranteed have a Ralts to play. I imagine, given how many cards he's got in hands, he should have a Curlier and a Gardevoir as well, which means I've got 2 turns until he starts ramping up. Okay, so in this situation, red card seems pretty good. He's got a big hand. It's very likely that he's got some kind of upgrades for Curlier and Gardevoir. In this point, I am going to... No need to potion right now. So I'm just going to peck again. Really would love a Pikachu at this point, but it is what it is. Really, the point of this Pikachu deck is to ramp up super quickly. Like, if I had a Pikachu right now, I would already be doing some major work. He's going to use... maybe he retreats. He potions. Interesting, okay. Don't you think that makes a difference next turn? Or maybe it does, so I'd have to get 3 heads in a row here. Interesting. Yes, okay, double potion. I'm going to die next turn regardless. There's normal Pikachu. I don't have Pikachu X. I'm just going to go for Thundering Hurricane. Hope I get 3 heads. 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 Tails, yeah. There we go. Sometimes Thundering Hurricane can just do that. And that's kind of why there's an alternate win condition for this deck. Didn't draw Pikachu whatsoever. And hey, everyone loves the fun of coin flip RNG. Your opponent conceded straight up. So I'm going to give a few tips on deck building now, because the first tip really should be this. You should build a deck around Pokemon that you like. Like, you should really just pick a Pokemon that you like and build your entire deck around that. But for the most part, there are some general rules that come when it comes to deck building. And I'll kind of go through them now. First of all, there are cards that are basically auto-include every single deck, almost. X-Speed, Potion, Pokeball, and Professor's Research. That basically takes up 8 slots of your deck already. All of these are incredibly good cards. Professor's Research is non-negotiable. It's some of the only card draw in the game. Pokeball draws basic Pokemon, which is great when you're looking for an evolution pathway. X-Speed is great for retreating, and Potion can help you out in certain situations. Then you've got to pick a package. So when we do deck building, we often talk about packages. Like, let's say Charizard evolution is a package, right? Let's say that the Vileplume package, the Vileplume evolution is a package. You're generally going to pick a package. So in this situation, I'm going to go for Charizard X. So what I need is, I'm actually going to go and make this kind of fancy. I want my special Charizard, and then I want my special Charmander. Got 2 of them. Special Charmander, and then I'm going to go get my normal Charizard X, which is somewhere here, and a couple Charmeleons. So I've got 2 Charmanders, 2 Charmeleons, 2 Charizards. That now takes my deck to 14. Now, when you're playing 1-3 evolution pathway, or a double evolution pathway, you do not want to go for another 3 evolution pathway. It is very difficult to make it work consistently. So you need to look for something that complements your package. Complements your pack. So the obvious choice with Charizard is Moltres, because Moltres has a 1 energy, flip 3 coins, take that amount of energy from your energy zone and add it to whichever Pokemon you see fit, which basically makes him insane with Charizard. So that kind of makes Charizard a kind of a no-brainer to include. I also have a special Moltres, which I should be able to find here. So I've got 2 Moltres X that I can drop in. Now to round this out, I've got 16 cards. I could add a couple of Sabrinas in. So Sabrina is pretty ubiquitously useful. If I can find Sabrina. It is quite annoying to find cards. So Sabrina is pretty ubiquitously useful. And then additionally, we could drop in a couple of red cards. The reason that we might not want to put any other standard sort of like Heatmore or that kind of Pokemon into the mix is simply because if I use Pokeball, I kind of want to get my Charmanders. If I don't have a Charmander, I kind of want to get my Charmander. Or Pokeball could also draw me a Moltres. You don't want to add, especially when you've got a very specific win condition, you don't want to add too many extra Pokemon to the mix. The caveat is that some decks really rely on Pokemon, like Pikachu X relies on Pokemon specifically, but in this case, a couple of red cards to help reset the opponent's hand if he draws too much. This is kind of like the standard Charizard deck. I haven't done anything special here, I've just talked about the theory about why these things are included. You also don't need to build decks around X Pokemon. Obviously, X Pokemon are headliners, but you've got to remember there are also downsides to having X Pokemon in your deck, where if they get knocked out, you lose 2 points rather than 1. Here is a Melmetal deck that has been popping up recently because of the Pikachu X dominance, and it includes no X Pokemon. It all revolves around using Melton to amass energy, level it up, and evolve it to Melmetal, and hopefully have enough energy to essentially do a huge amount of damage. You do heavy impact, you don't lose any energy when you cast it. You have hard coat, which basically reduces it negates the fire advantage versus him, and also then just reduces 20 damage from anybody attacking him, which means he can take well, he'll still get 1 kill by a side drive from Mewtwo, but Pikachu will do way less damage to it. Your basic Starmie decks will do 70 damage to it. So there are some elements here that are good, and especially when combined with Potion, these can kind of hopefully keep it in the fight for a little bit longer. And then we also have a sort of a combine with Wheezing. What you can do with Wheezing is just essentially just poison someone. And obviously then got 110 HP, so quite tanky. And then using Koga, you can essentially take the Wheezing out of your hand and put it back, so out of the active spot and put it back into your hand, which basically removes any kind of damage done to it and can put it straight back in the field afterwards as well. So you can kind of play around a little bit as well. It's a pretty fun deck to have a go at, and I'm going to play it relatively shortly too, but just saying, you don't need an X Pokemon in your deck. There are plenty of strong non-X Pokemon that can be very, very powerful in the current meta. So there we have it. That is my advanced sort of guide to Pokemon Pocket. Hopefully you guys learned something. If you think I missed a tip or trick, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. If not, I'm going to be posting more deck lists, going to be posting more games. Yeah, I love this game. Hope you guys do too.